As I said I would, I returned to this to look at what I would do if I were trying to lift this beyond these remedies that I've put in here, because I think this is going to be significant, because I don't think some of these remedies are going to be necessary. But I wanted to look at it as if I were going to be attempting to lift this back as when I was a contractor. And this film will be a little jumbled because of the way it's been put together, going as I go. But it does cover some significant stuff. First off, I wanted to look at where we had to lift and how we were going to do that. But one of the first things I kind of considered is that thing is sagging for a reason, and the floor joists are sagging as well. And I looked at the weight of the cabinetry, and the loading on those joists has been rated as 40 pounds per square foot, which is the code requirement. But when you look up kitchen cabinetry and find out how much they weigh, together the bases weigh about 13 or 14 pounds per square feet without the countertop, without the granite, which that's been accounted for. And the wall cabinets weigh 25. So that alone is 40 pounds per square foot. So I went back, and just so that I would know, so that I wouldn't make any errors with how much weight we had to lift, I went back and increased the loading on all these members that are involved through here to 45 pounds per square foot. And and obviously it failed again, and worse, it failed at 148%. But that didn't matter for this. I just wanted to see how much we were going to have to lift, because there's heavy loading all the way across here, and on this side most of it's pushed over here by this header, whatever they've got going up here, holding these cabinets up here. But there's still the same load up here with this appliance as well. And if you look over on the overview, there's the main beam that ends up being the problem. We looked at this earlier. This is the problem is kind of in that area, and to a lesser extent possibly up at that end as well. But when you come down to it, the real problem is refined to this area right here, and not so much these here. I think those can be left alone for a moment, because remember, those floor joists are just about almost passing there, and our problem is definitely in this beam, or has to start with that beam. So these are the two new footings here that have to be poured regardless. Those have to be poured, and presumably you would put a jack post there and a jack post there, one of these, which we review too exhaustively a little bit further along. A jack post there, and then presumably that one there is going to split out into two jack posts. Temporarily, you could leave them in permanently. Those are going to be split out into two separate ones on either side of that. And if this thing is not at least 6 inches thick, then this is probably, I'm a little worried about pushing down on that at the edge. But as it is, those will fit on the edges of that existing footing. And when that beam starts to go up, when those jack posts are turned and that beam starts to go up, those floor joists really don't have any choice but to go up as well. They will bend, presumably they will bend here and here. But that is what can be monitored, and then it can be determined whether these are also going to need to be poured, because I don't see us being able to double these joists through here. The other thing that will have to be monitored as that lifting process occurs is crushing at the end of these floor joists, where they cross that beam and are being pushed up by the jacking motion. That 1,000 pounds doesn't hurt. Otherwise they would say that you got a problem right here with crushing. And even if, I bet you, even if we increase that to 2,000, we still don't have a problem with crushing. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's something to keep an eye on, but I don't think it's, particularly if those joists are soft for any kind of moisture reasons, that's going to be something to keep an eye on, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. And when you look at that particular member, you can see they are allowing a squeeze of 2,800 pounds over 4.5 inches. So, and our actual is around 2,800. So I think we'll be okay as far as that goes, as far as crushing goes. So you have that as a kind of a the approach is 4 jack posts, for these lally column jack posts. Yeah, see, there was when I put that loading, when I increased that loading to 45 pounds per square foot in that region, we failed by 148%, but I was looking to see what are these numbers going to be here if that were the loading. And we come down here to where our remedied thing is, and we have these 6 column locations with these loads at those locations. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across here. That's where the loads are coming down. So we are going to be having jack posts at 3, 4, and 5. Number 4 is about 6,500 pounds, so we're splitting that into 2 columns there, into 2 temporary things for lifting, so that we get that down to 3,200. Now recall, upstairs, our floor was becoming level. In this here, it sloped down from this to here and from there to there. So we're not going to be messing with 2 at all. Our first lifting point starts at number 3. I told you it would be confusing, but our first jack post is here. We'll take out these walls that we had in there and transfer those points to this, and that's where the jack posts are going to go, depending on how high or low you set those new footings. These ones stay where they are. And then this is what the lally column we would use, and we want to stay away from these kind that have these bolts through. We just want a solid column with this 1-inch screw down here. That screw, if you turn that around 7 times, that's 1 inch. So it's 7 of those threads per inch as you lift. Now I can't remember, we had homed in on which one it was. I think it was about $68, something like this one possibly. That's the one, yeah, this is it right here, this $68 one. That's what we had honed in on as the right height, or we do hone in on further down in here. So, and there's the footing, and that's that plate on the edge of that lally column, and it does fit on that footing, that 5-inch wide plate, bottom plate. And you would have to, the problem with that is when you turn that thing that turns it has to be able to come out, because you're not going to be able to turn that thing past here. On the other ones you're fine, but these ones that are tight here, you're going to have to pull that turner out and push it in the other side and turn it that way. I'm not going to read this to you, but I am reading it. I am not overly concerned about that structure, lifting that main beam once we get it up off of those pedestals. I'm not overly worried about that shifting east and west because of all the fastening at the wall plate and the rim joist. So I don't think that's going to be something to worry about. And someone else, oh, here it is here. We have about 3/4 or 1.25 inches of sag, and ours is bearing right on a couple pieces of plywood is what it looks like at our problematic pedestals. I don't believe we have any mechanicals that are going to interfere with this process. That would be checked out, of course, because there is the sink and so forth over there. But I don't think where we're lifting that, I don't think we're going to have that problem, but we will have to look, because presumably as we lift that, those joists come up. Now here's somebody that's at least a PE. And they only have 3 2x10s, but they have a shorter span. Your span is 32 feet east to west, and theirs was only 28, and they had 3 2x10s. But he did this. So none of this stuff, some of these caveats are not applying to us. And I think the main thing is once those jack posts are in, then somebody just has to get under there periodically and continue that lifting process with a spelled out process, which ones to lift and how far. And we're looking, ideally, I think I measured 1 1/8 inches at the place I measured, and I don't know if that's the worst place, but I measured the main beam only sagging maybe 1 inch or 3/4 or 7/8, something like that. So as I said, and we lifted, I think I mentioned this before, we lifted a stairwell, and we only spent a couple months on that because we are not having to consider anything at the ceiling. That ceiling should be staying right where it is regardless, as that wall that's dividing the entry from the dinette is lifted. There's going to be nail resistance everywhere we go, and so the only choice is to go slow. I think if you did an inch over 3 months even, that's a third of an inch a month, so 3 or 4 or 5 trips back in, probably 6 trips in on the twisting, and I think you would be alright. And we could check the process along the way. But that is my feeling so far on this research. I just watched a film, which is what I expected it would be, but I did look up on these lally columns, which is what those things are called, and I've seen whole houses where those are in place permanently, but I wanted to double check that, and this is what I found. This is what AI found. So if you solve that moisture problem down there, and that should be a fairly straightforward process, then I don't think you can have would have any problem just leaving those lally columns in place and not even bothering coming back with 6x6s or anything like that. And it would also give you the ability, if the thing, you could take as long as you like lifting that. Once those footings are in place, those new concrete footings are in place, and those lally columns are installed, even the one that's going to be on that, there's going to be 2 here, 1 on each side, so we can distribute this 6,400 pound load to these edges as we're lifting that. Eventually, once it's lifted where we want it, we will put some sort of blocking in here, treated lumber blocking in here, and that will be permanent. And those 2 could actually, those could be removed. Those don't need to stay there. These other 2 would just stay there permanently instead of those 6x6s that I've been showing in that earlier approach. And you're familiar with these people, and they might offer some sort of other approach, but this, I don't have their expertise, but this was my experience in what I would do if I were trying to address that. I would start with that main beam. I would kind of ignore those side beams because we can take as long really as we like until you're going to start installing new kitchen type stuff up here, and then we're going to begin to get cracking and so forth. And if this stuff is staying in place, we're probably going to get cracking on that backsplash, I would think. But if we take our time, we can take that up slow and see how these joists do. And because one of the things when I first spoke to the engineer and mentioned these 2x10 joists at 16, his immediate response was, well, that should be okay. But of course we refined that where our problem is with this main beam. And that would be the part, and we would have that going across your beams like this. So if this top plate is 7.5 inches wide, then we have a 6-inch beam down there. So we're going to have projection on each side. And this is exactly what we're looking to do as seen here. And there are your model numbers. So 20, okay, they're all 3-inch diameters, the ones that we're using. And then you've got the ones that we would need, so something in the neighborhood of 24.5. And depending on where these new footings are poured, this one can be measured exactly, and that actually should be, it should be about that. It should be about 24 3/4. So that one's going to be a little bit more than 24, and then the other one, presumably you can pour that and know what it's going to be. But if we say 21.5, so that's this one here, which is 20 to 24. And if we want to see the next one, they don't have one. The next one starts at 2'0" at 24 inches. So you'd almost have to get this one for all of them, because you can pour these where you need to, depending on how much of that hard Scrabble stuff you can root out. And then these ones here, you just have to confirm is 2 foot. It needs to be a little bit more than that. So my best guess is that we still use that same one, but up here at the top of this, we're going to put a piece of LVL, crossways, plankwise, here and here on those two. So we can just order 4 of these PM118s and end up with this. Of course, each of these has a crank at the bottom. And that can obviously, that could be a permanent solution. They call those mini columns. That's what they called them. It's nice because they have the long one going in line with that, but we need to pick up that if that thing is only 4.5 inches wide, our beam is 6 inches wide. And they show that plate, it's going to be no larger than those other ones. You can see the column's 3, and so this plate doesn't look like it's any more than 4 or 4.5. So we need some way to pick up that whole 6-inch width that we're looking to lift. And so it might be necessary to get some 3/8 by 6-inch by 4-inch wide steel plates and put up there first crosswise on that beam, on that across here. That's what I would say to do, is just put those up there, and then these go up against those. You could even have those drilled to match these holes. And really, I think that's it for this film. I just wanted to take some sort of approach to see what I would do if it were me, if I was trying to remedy this either at my own house or for someone else. That's where I would start. And then these and I would see how that goes, how these are lifting, how conditions are changing up here, kind of in an ongoing fashion. And maybe that can even happen. Maybe some of this could happen, possibly, depending upon what your approach wants to be with that bathroom remodeling at the master suite upstairs. And one more thing before I go, I did want to mention this, and at least for this film I felt it would be remiss if we didn't look at the framing elsewhere, since this is definitely deficient in one way or another. This is deficient down through here, and so I wanted to make sure or double check what was happening on that upper level up here. And this was my first early guess, is here obviously you can see that the 2x10s are running this way down through here. Presumably they come all the way over and cantilever out here. Maybe they're joined here or lapped over this wall here, but they are stretched 20 foot 1.5 out to out. And this is bathroom loading up here, and this is how I first guessed that that might be put together, that framing might be put together, but I don't know, and it's going to require a further investigation. In any event, I began to look at these members, J1A, J1B, and J1C, just to run the numbers on those as well. And this is bathroom floor loading, so this has to be 40 pounds per square foot. And this fails, and it fails pretty miserably at 168%. So a remedy needs made through here. And even if I lower that to 30 pounds per square foot, if it were not bathroom, so 40 is what is actually required, it still fails. So moving on to J1B, and I don't think they're this way. I went a little further and I don't think they're that way. But moving on to J1B, and that can be at 30 pounds per square foot because that's all bedroom load, and that passes pretty handily. Finally, J1C, which is the one that cantilevers out, that also passes with any of these species if it were put together that way. But the thing about the way this is framed or shown or put together is that I'm assuming that there's a beam through here that these are going back to. When you start sizing that beam, that drop beam that's maybe hidden by that soffit, it would take 4 pieces again of these upgrade species to do that. So I don't think that's how it's put together, but certainly we should track it down. Now, 3 2x12s, and I don't know how high that soffit is, whether to accommodate that or not. But again, I don't think it's actually put together that way, because I thought I saw a scrap in one of my photos of these joists running this way here, and obviously that's going to be well fine if those are 13.2, but then it's the size of these 2 beams here. This is just another approach that perhaps they took. And really, it almost has to be framed similarly to this because they've got that big HVAC line in that soffit going across there, and that is to feed those joists running east and west. It's my best guess in any event. One way or another, this should be refined so that you know what you have there. And that's it for this film. I just didn't want to leave you hanging kind of with that other one. I wanted to take some sort of approach to see how I would start to look at that if it were my place. Okay, that's all for now. I will talk to you soon. Thanks very much.